There are people who carry the world quietly. They don't tremble when things fall apart. They offer soft smiles where others would collapse. They listen, reassure, rebuild, and never ask for help. Strength, they were told, is noble. And so they became the pillar, steady, composed, impenetrable. But beneath the calm surface, there is an ache that doesn't speak, a loneliness too dignified to be loud. Because when strength becomes identity, vulnerability starts to feel like betrayal. And the ones who appear the strongest are often the ones who never feel safe enough to fall apart. This is the quiet grief of those who hold everything together, the invisible sadness behind always being strong. There are people who move through chaos as if the wind itself bows around them. They are the calm in every storm, the ones others call reliable, stable, unshakable. Their tone stays even, their eyes steady. When others crumble, they become the anchor. And yet, behind that serenity, there is a quiet ache that hums like static beneath the skin. Strength for them is not a choice. It's muscle memory. It's what they learned to do when no one else knew how to hold things together. It's the invisible script written into their nervous system. Stay calm. Stay capable. Don't fall apart. Even their silence feels like reassurance. Even their exhaustion looks composed. They walk through their days carrying a kind of invisible armor, smooth, polished, untouchable. But if you look closely, you'll see the weight in their stillness, the tension that never quite leaves their shoulders. The pause before they say, "I'm fine." Because composure, though it looks like peace, often comes at a cost. It means being the container for emotions that have nowhere else to go. It means swallowing storms so that others can feel safe. It means appearing whole, even when the heart feels fractured in quiet, private ways. There's a strange loneliness in always being the one who doesn't fall apart. When you are the pillar, people stop checking if you're tired. They stop asking if you're okay, not out of cruelty, but out of assumption. Strength becomes your mask, and over time, your identity. They become fluent in the language of reassurance. They learn to say things like, "It's all right," "I can handle it," or "Don't worry about me." But beneath those words lives another truth, a yearning to be seen without having to hold everything so perfectly still. Inside them, there is a quiet contradiction. They long for someone to notice their tremor, to look past the practiced calm and see the person underneath, fragile, tender, human. But the fear is just as strong. What if the moment I let go, everything I've built falls apart? What if being strong is the only thing keeping me safe? So they stay composed. They smile when they're tired. They comfort when they need comforting. They keep moving when their soul wants to rest, and the world applauds them for it. The strong ones receive admiration disguised as distance. People look at them and say, "You're so strong," without realizing that strength can also be a wound, a performance perfected over years of quiet endurance. Their composure is often mistaken for inner peace. But sometimes it's not peace at all. It's a truce, an agreement with pain that says, "I will not let you show." It's the art of appearing calm while holding back the flood. Still, there are moments, small, fleeting, when the mask slips. Late at night, when the room is dark and the noise has settled, they feel the fatigue sink in. Their body, finally unobserved, exhales. The breath trembles. The stillness feels heavy. And for a moment, the truth whispers through that being composed all the time is its own kind of grief, because composure is not the absence of pain. It's the containment of it. And while the world sees steadiness, what it doesn't see is the quiet emotional labor of keeping it all inside. They have learned how to hold everything, except themselves. And somewhere deep down, they know. This strength they wear so gracefully is also the thing that keeps them from being known. Because no one reaches for the person who never seems to need saving. And so they carry on, gentle, dependable, unwavering. But beneath the surface, a question lingers like a heartbeat. What would it feel like? To be strong enough to fall apart? No one is born strong. Strength is something learned, often in rooms where softness wasn't safe. It begins quietly, in childhood moments that pass unnoticed by the world. A slammed door, a tired mother, a father lost in silence. A small heart realizing that emotions can be dangerous, that crying makes things worse, that calmness keeps the peace. So they learned early, composure earns safety. They became the responsible one, the helper, the peacemaker. They cleaned the mess before anyone asked. They learned to read the air, to sense tension before it arrived. Their body became an antenna for everyone else's mood. And each time they succeeded in preventing conflict, their nervous system rewarded them with a fragile kind of control. Strength, for them, wasn't a gift. It was adaptation. It grew from the soil of unpredictability, from families where love came with conditions, where approval depended on how well you performed your calm. Children like this often grow into adults who equate stability with worth. They find meaning in being reliable, in being the one others can count on. Because once upon a time, being the strong one meant survival. It meant avoiding rejection, punishment, or chaos. It meant holding themselves together so the world didn't fall apart. In psychology, this is often the birth of hyper-independence, a pattern where self-sufficiency feels safer than intimacy, where asking for help feels like exposure. They learn to meet their own needs before anyone could disappoint them. And over time, that self-protection started to look like maturity. But underneath that independence lies a child who learned that needing others was dangerous, who learned that love was conditional, that emotions must be managed, not expressed. That strength was the only way to be seen. Even in adulthood, these lessons linger, woven into the body's memory. They show up in small, quiet ways, in the automatic "I'm fine," in the inability to rest, in the discomfort that comes when someone offers genuine care, because care to them feels unfamiliar, even threatening. The mind might forget the origin, but the body remembers. It remembers the tightness in the chest when voices rose. It remembers the stillness required to stay invisible. It remembers learning that safety meant silence. Strength became a ritual, a shield against rejection, a mask that hid fear, a script that said, "If I can handle everything, no one will leave." And yet, that very script becomes a prison. Because when you spend your whole life being strong for others, you forget how to be soft for yourself. You forget how to be cared for without earning it. You forget that love, the real kind, does not demand perfection. Many who grow up this way find themselves drawn to caretaking roles, the friend who listens, the partner who fixes, the colleague who manages. They are steady in crisis, fluent in empathy, and yet often unaware of how much of that empathy they owe to their own unhealed tenderness. To understand their strength is to see it not as resilience, but as response. A survival pattern mistaken for personality, an adaptation praised by society, but born from loneliness. There's a certain poetry in that, how what once kept them safe now keeps them distant. How the child who held their breath to stay unseen grew into an adult who holds everything to stay loved. And perhaps this is where compassion must begin, in recognizing that being strong was never arrogance or pride. It was protection. It was a brilliant, desperate strategy to keep life from collapsing, but what was once necessary eventually becomes heavy. The armor that once protected begins to suffocate, and one day, without warning, the same strength that once saved them starts to whisper, "You don't have to hold everything anymore." To understand the strength that never breaks, one must first understand the nervous system that learned not to. Resilience, the kind we admire, is not simply emotional toughness. It is biology, conditioning, the body's long rehearsal in keeping the heart safe. When a person grows used to unpredictability or emotional tension, the body becomes fluent in defense. The mind, like a careful architect, constructs barriers of control. Emotions that once rushed through freely begin to move differently, slower, quieter, hidden beneath reason. They call it composure. Psychology calls it suppression. Suppression isn't denial. It's a form of containment. The nervous system, overwhelmed by repeated stress, learns that feeling too deeply can be dangerous. So it tightens, contracts, regulates. The body holds back tears before they even rise. The jaw stiffens when sadness tries to surface. The chest forgets how to expand fully. This is not weakness nor flaw. It is an exquisite form of self-preservation. In psychological terms, it's part of the autonomic response, the body's instinctive effort to maintain balance in the face of threat. For some, that means fight or flight. For others, and especially the ones who were taught to be calm, it means freeze or fawn. The body chooses stillness over chaos, harmony over honesty. Over time, this becomes identity. They no longer just act calm. They are calm. Calm in the face of betrayal. Calm during heartbreak. Calm while carrying burdens that would crush others. But inside, the system hums with unspoken electricity. It's like a held breath that never fully releases. Attachment theory helps explain why. Those who grew up with inconsistent emotional availability often develop what psychologists call anxious avoidant patterns. They crave connection deeply, but equate closeness with risk. They fear rejection, yet fear dependence even more. So they regulate the only thing they can, themselves. They love quietly, endure silently, and rarely ask for reassurance, because reassurance feels like weakness. In therapy, this looks like a person who smiles while recounting pain, who says it wasn't that bad when it was, who minimizes trauma not because they want to forget, but because they need to believe it didn't shape them. It's a defense called intellectualization, the translation of emotion into thought. It's safer to understand pain than to feel it, but resilience, in its purest form, was never meant to mean resistance. It was meant to mean recovery, adaptation, the ability to bend and return, not harden and remain still. The tragedy of the strong one is that their resilience has become rigidity. They've been strong for so long that even gentleness feels foreign. Their body confuses safety with tension. Their mind confuses peace with numbness. Neuroscience calls this emotional habituation, when the brain becomes so accustomed to self-restraint that emotional arousal feels threatening. It's why praise makes them uncomfortable, why comfort feels suspicious, why they struggle to receive love that doesn't require endurance. And yet, there's something quietly heroic in it. Because beneath every act of suppression is a body trying to protect its heart. Beneath every silence is a child who once felt unsafe expressing need. Even the walls they've built are acts of care, imperfect but sincere. The journey, then, is not about dismantling strength. It's about teaching the body that it no longer needs to guard so tightly. It's about learning that safety can exist in softness too. That vulnerability does not undo resilience, it completes it. True resilience is not about how much you can hold. It's about how gently you can release. It's the quiet shift from I can handle it to I don't have to handle it alone. But that realization doesn't come easily. Because for those who have built a life around being strong, the idea of not holding everything together feels terrifying. And that fear, the fear of letting go, is where the next chapter begins. There is a quiet war that lives inside the strong ones. It doesn't roar. It doesn't spill into arguments or collapse into tears. It hums, softly, constantly, beneath the surface of calm. It is the conflict between the person they are and the person they secretly wish they could be. Between the image of control they've perfected and the chaos of emotion they've buried. Between the longing to be cared for and the fear of being seen as weak. To the outside world, they appear balanced. Inside, they live in contradiction. They want to rest but can't stop bracing. They crave closeness but flinch at dependence. They want to speak but swallow every word that might make them appear fragile. Because for them, asking for help feels unnatural, like trying to write with the wrong hand. They've spent years being the helper, the caretaker, the one who holds. So when the need arises to be held, it collides with something deep. Shame. Not the loud, visible kind. The quiet shame that whispers, you shouldn't need this. You should know better. It's the guilt of being human when you've built your worth on being invincible. So they keep it hidden. They package exhaustion as busyness. They rename loneliness as independence. They disguise longing as composure, and the world believes them. Because the world often loves strength more than honesty, people prefer the calm one, the dependable one, not realizing that behind that serenity lives a constant self-discipline, the suppression of need, the redirection of pain, the silencing of fear. Psychologists call this emotional incongruence, the gap between what one feels and what one shows. It's not deception, it's protection. A lifetime of managing others' emotions trains a person to conceal their own. They become fluent in emotional translation, turning sadness into productivity, anger into silence, fear into control. But the body keeps the score. When emotions are buried alive, they don't die. They echo. They appear as fatigue that sleep can't fix, as restlessness during stillness, as anxiety that arrives without reason. It's the body's way of saying, you've been strong for too long. Sometimes this conflict surfaces in subtle ways, a flicker of irritation when someone offers help, a strange emptiness after success, tears that appear out of nowhere, not from sadness, but from release. The nervous system, tired of being contained, begins to tremble its way toward honesty, yet even then they resist. Because falling apart feels like failure. Because somewhere inside, there is still that child who learned that calm keeps you loved. And so they keep choosing control, not because they want to, but because losing it feels like losing safety. There's a term in trauma psychology called functional freeze, a state where a person continues to move, work, perform, while emotionally they've gone numb. They function flawlessly, but feel disconnected from life itself. Their laughter feels rehearsed. Their comfort feels distant. They're there, but not fully there. It's a strange form of survival, to be present in body, but absent in emotion. To perform strength even when it no longer fits. And in that performance, a kind of grief lingers. Because deep down, they know something is missing. Not success, not recognition, but softness, the kind that doesn't need to earn belonging. They want to be seen not as the strong one, but as the whole one, yet that want terrifies them. Because if they stop being strong, what remains? If the mask drops, who will they be? If they show weakness, will anyone stay? These questions circle quietly, like unspoken prayers. And slowly, imperceptibly, the tension builds. The stillness begins to crack. Not loudly, not all at once, but in small, tender ways. Until one day, the weight of composure becomes too heavy to carry alone. That moment, the one where control begins to tremble, isn't a collapse. It's an opening. The point where the body finally decides it's time to stop surviving. It rarely happens with a dramatic explosion. More often it begins quietly, in the smallest, most unremarkable moments. A misplaced key, a harsh word from someone they love, a task they've done 1,000 times before suddenly feels impossible, and for a second, their carefully held composure slips. It's not the event itself that breaks them. It's the accumulation. The invisible weight of years spent holding it all together, finally tipping over the edge of endurance. The body knows before the mind does. The breath shortens, the throat tightens. There's a tremor beneath the calm, a strange dizziness that feels like truth trying to surface. And the whisper comes again. You can't keep doing this, but they try. Of course they do, because to them, breaking down feels like betrayal. To the image they've built, to the people who rely on them, to the idea that being strong means never falling apart. So they pull themselves back together. They smile through the crack, patch it with apology or humor. They tell themselves, I just need rest. I just need to get through this week. But the body doesn't believe words anymore. The nervous system has begun to remember everything it was told to forget. Sometimes the crack shows up as tears, not loud, but sudden. Sometimes it's exhaustion that sleep can't touch. Sometimes it's silence that no longer feels peaceful. And in that stillness, something shifts, because for the first time, they don't rush to fix it. They just stop. They let themselves feel the trembling. And what rises is not weakness, but grief. Ancient, tender, long-denied grief. It's the grief of all the years spent being strong when they wanted to be held. The grief of every I'm fine that wasn't. The grief of being loved for their composure, but not for their truth. Psychologists describe this as emotional thawing, the slow melting of frozen affect, when feelings once locked away begin to move again. It's often mistaken for breakdown, but in truth, it's breakthrough. The nervous system finally trusting that it's safe enough to release. And yes, it's frightening. The emotions don't return politely. They surge. Sadness mixes with anger, relief with fear. It feels chaotic, unfamiliar, like standing in a room full of echoes. Every uncried tear, every silenced need returning at once. But within the chaos, there's also clarity. Because when the mask slips, so does the illusion that strength was ever about holding everything in. They begin to see how exhaustion had disguised itself as resilience, how numbness had masqueraded as calm, how silence had been mistaken for wisdom. In that moment, they don't want advice. They don't want to be told to stay positive or keep going. They just want space to be human, space to breathe without bracing, space to let the body shake and the tears fall without apology, and something sacred happens when they do. The world doesn't collapse. The people who truly care don't turn away. The earth stays steady beneath their feet. And for the first time, strength begins to mean something different. It's not the strength to endure anymore. It's the strength to surrender. To admit that they are tired. To whisper, I can't do this alone. It's the strength to fall apart and trust that this too is a form of healing, because breaking is not the end of strength. It's how strength learns to breathe again, and from those cracks, light begins to seep in. Soft, fragile, merciful light, the kind that doesn't demand perfection, only presence. The kind that whispers, "You made it this far by holding everything together. Now you heal by letting it go." Healing doesn't begin with grand declarations. It begins with small, quiet permissions. The permission to rest when nothing is done. The permission to feel without explanation. The permission to exist without earning ease. For the ones who've always been strong, softness feels foreign at first. It arrives awkwardly, like a language they once knew but forgot how to speak. Their body doesn't quite trust it. Their mind asks, is it safe to let go? Will I still be loved if I stop performing strength? Because for so long, they've believed that to be loved is to be useful, to be needed, to be the one who holds. So when life finally offers them gentleness, they flinch. Not because they don't want it, but because softness requires surrender, and surrender has always felt like danger. But healing is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits for the moment when exhaustion outweighs fear. When the heart, tired of guarding itself, begins to lean forward, just a little, toward warmth. In therapy, this looks like the first tear that escapes without permission. The first time they say, "I don't know what I feel." The first time silence is allowed to exist without filling it with reassurance. It's not loud, not cinematic. It's slow, hesitant, deeply human. Psychologists call this relearning emotional safety, the process of teaching the nervous system that vulnerability will not result in harm, that crying won't cause rejection, that needing won't end in shame. The brain, over time, rewires its associations. Softness no longer equals danger. It begins to equal connection. And that's the heart of healing, not the absence of pain, but the presence of safety while feeling it. They start noticing new things, how the body relaxes when someone listens without fixing, how comfort can exist in quiet company, how a deep breath, taken without rush, feels like an act of courage. These are the small miracles of softness, moments so subtle that they almost go unnoticed, yet they begin to rebuild trust in life itself. Gradually, strength begins to take a new shape. It's no longer about endurance, it's about authenticity. It's about saying, "I'm struggling today," and not apologizing for it. It's about being able to both hold others and be held in return. This kind of strength doesn't wear armor. It wears tenderness. It speaks gently. It doesn't perform calmness. It embodies peace. And when the old reflexes arise, the instinct to suppress, to appear fine, they notice them now. They pause. They take a breath instead of building a wall. Because softness isn't something you arrive at. It's something you practice, again and again, until the body begins to believe it's allowed to be unguarded. Sometimes healing looks like laughter that comes easily again. Sometimes it's sitting in silence and realizing the stillness no longer feels heavy. Sometimes it's letting someone's hand linger in yours and not pulling away out of habit. It's subtle, but profound. The reintroduction of gentleness into a life that once revolved around control. The discovery that being soft doesn't mean being broken, that asking for help doesn't erase dignity, that allowing oneself to be seen is, in fact, the bravest act of all, because the truth is, softness was never the opposite of strength. It was always its missing half, the part that makes strength humane, the part that turns endurance into grace. And as they begin to live from this place, half strong, half soft, something inside them exhales for the first time in years. They no longer have to be the hero in every story. They can simply be human, and that, finally, is enough. There comes a moment when strength no longer feels like a performance, when it softens into something quieter, almost tender. It's not about endurance anymore. It's about truth. About allowing life to move through you without the need to constantly hold it back. This is what freedom looks like for those who once carried everything. Not the loud kind of freedom, not rebellion, not escape, but the still kind. The freedom to feel tired without guilt, to need without apology, to let others see you not as perfect, but as real. They begin to understand that being human was never a flaw to be managed. It was always the point. For so long, they believed they had to earn peace, through control, through giving, through holding it all together. But peace, they find, isn't something you achieve. It's something that arrives when you finally stop pretending. When you can sit in your own company and feel no urgency to fix yourself. When you can admit that you're still healing, and that healing doesn't mean you were ever broken, only growing. Psychology often describes self-acceptance as the foundation of mental well-being. But in lived experience, it's something gentler, a quiet reconciliation between all your parts. The strong one, the scared one, the tired one, the one who pretended. They all finally sit at the same table. No part of you left outside. This is integration, the final movement of healing. It's when resilience and vulnerability stop competing and begin to coexist. When strength is no longer about resistance but about flexibility, about trusting that you can bend with life and not lose yourself in the process. There's a peace that comes with that trust, a kind that doesn't require proof. You stop needing to be unshakable. You stop fearing the tremble in your voice. You start to see the beauty in imperfection, the kind of beauty that lives not in control, but in openness. The people around you notice it too. You listen the same way as before, but your eyes are softer. You give, but not until you're empty. You care, but you also let yourself be cared for. This balance, this steady rhythm between giving and receiving, becomes the new definition of strong. It's not that pain disappears. It still visits as it always has, but now it doesn't stay as long, because you no longer meet it with resistance. You greet it like an old teacher. I know you. I've learned from you. You can rest now, and when the world still calls you strong, because it will, you smile differently. Because now you know strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking open in ways that let more light in. You begin to see others differently too. The ones who seem invincible. You recognize the quiet ache behind their eyes. You meet their composure with gentleness instead of admiration, because you've learned that everyone is carrying something unseen. And that compassion, not perfection, is what keeps us connected. In the end, strength returns to its purest form, not armor, but presence. The ability to stand in the full truth of your humanity, the laughter, the fatigue, the mess, the grace. To know that you can be both grounded and uncertain, both soft and steadfast, both whole and becoming. This is the freedom behind the facade. The quiet revolution of allowing yourself to be seen, not as the strong one, but as the human one. And as the story closes, there is no triumphal music. Only stillness, a deep, clean breath, the kind you take after setting down a weight you didn't know you were carrying, because the hidden sadness behind always being strong was never about weakness at all. It was about longing, the longing to finally be loved, not for how well you endure, but for how beautifully, honestly human you are.